Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, and my co-host Justin Baker and I are along for the playoff preview ride as we've done the 5-12s and the 6-11 matchups. You can go back and listen to those if you haven't heard them. Subscribe to the show wherever you're listening, and hit back, listen to those. But we are moving on to the 7v10s. The New York Islanders and the Florida Panthers and the Vancouver Canucks and the Minnesota Wild. Some of the I don't know, kind of the most up in the air series that we have done so far are these collections of series. And we're just going to jump right into it. The New York Islanders, Florida Panthers is where we're going to start. And Justin, I just want to get your initial thoughts of this series, as it is a rematch of the last time the Panthers made the playoffs.
Good little bit of trivia. Yeah, honestly, this is the series of underachievers, in my opinion, when you look at this, right? I mean, the Islanders finishing the season at number 7, the Panthers obviously coming in at number 10. And both of these teams, I mean, maybe you and I in our season predictions, I can't remember what you specifically had, but I had the Islanders kind of dropping off a little bit because I didn't see a lot of, sustainability when it came to winning games 2-1 all the time, especially in this day and age with the NHL just scoring a boatload of goals all the time. But Panthers, especially, another team that I fully expected to push for a top 3 spot, right, alongside the Maple Leafs, the Lightning, and even the Boston Bruins. I fully expected the Panthers to be there, to be a team that could contend for one of those top 3 spots, albeit before we had this whole funky playoff situation now. And so, yeah, both these teams just kind of underperforming what people thought they were really going to get out of both teams.
Yeah, I mean, so when you look at these two teams playing each other, regular season wise, the Islanders won all 3 games. They win October 12th, 3-2 in a shootout. Now, November 9th, 2-1 in regulation, and December 12th, 3-1 in regulation, obviously, as well. And when you look at those regular season matchups, obviously a little earlier in the season, but that was really when the Panthers were playing okay at that point. So, take that for what it is. Obviously, it's all going to be kind of crazy anyways. I think maybe more so than ever, regular season matchup means less than anything we can imagine. But in terms of these two teams' playing styles, I think there couldn't be two teams more different facing off against each other. The Panthers 7th in goals for, 28th in goals against. Islanders 23rd in goals for, 6th in goals against. So we're seeing one team that is all about the offense, because that's really the only choice they've had given the way that they have gotten very poor goaltending. And of course the Islanders are the opposite. They don't really have a lot of offensive weapons. Therefore, they're coached by Barry Trotz, so of course they're going to be focused on the defensive side of the game. So it's going to be, which group is able to show up with their abilities early on in these playoffs. Nobody's played in 4, 5, maybe 6 months by the time we play. What's going to be easier to chug along? Is it the Islanders' defensive system, or is it the Panthers' creative offensive abilities?
Yeah, and that you mentioned it, right, the coaching, and I couldn't be more excited to see this kind of coaching battle between two of the greats in the game, Coach Q and Barry Trotz, right? We're going to have two coaches that are going to probably have to adjust at every single game, and I'm assuming, again, we're going to have 3 in one spot, 2 in the other, but, again, home ice really doesn't matter. It's all going to be about last change when it comes to the quote-unquote home ice advantage when you talk about it in this series. And so for both coaches, whose style is going to prevail and who's going to be able to adjust on the fly with their team in such a short series to really counterattack what the other team might be doing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think let's go through the different positions as we've done on all of our other pre-series rankings. It started pouring outside my window, and it just distracted me for a minute. But our previews, So we went forwards, defensive, goalies. I want to start at the defensive position because I think for the Islanders it's one of the most important spots, especially given the way that they play. I know they play a great all-team defense, but the Islanders acquired Andy Green at the trade deadline. It was, maybe it slid under the radar a little bit. Andy Green isn't exactly the Andy Green that, we knew maybe 5 years ago, but he's still a serviceable defenseman. Since they acquired Andy Green at the deadline, though, the Islanders are 2-5-3 with him in the lineup. I know it was a long time ago at this point, but he steps in. I know they had a few injuries, but this team didn't exactly, he slotted in. He was playing 18, 19 minutes a game for the most part. His time on ice with the Islanders is a little bit, when you actually go in and look, I think it shows like 14 minutes something, but he only played 3 minutes of one game because he got hurt. So it kind of skews the whole thing when you've only played 10 games and one of those you happen to play 3 minutes. But Andy Green is a guy who I think they were hoping would fit in nicely with that defensive core. They didn't play very well leading up to this, everything stopping. It's a great time for the Islanders to be able to rally and all right, we can forget about that. We can move on. But you got to think that this team that struggles to score, they were really struggling to score beforehand. Are they going to be able to score goals coming out of this long break? It seems to be a group that needs some cohesiveness to be able to score, and I'm wondering if that's going to be an issue. You look at their possession numbers of all the playoff teams, the Islanders are the worst. They were 29th in the league. I think the only teams worse than them were the Red Wings and somebody else who was terrible.
Probably Ottawa.
They're 20th in 5-on-5 goal differential. Just a team that did not have much control over the puck. And that to me is a big problem when you are coming up against the Florida Panthers. I know the Panthers didn't win a single game against the Islanders in the regular season, but the Islanders, I think, were maybe more of a lucky team this year than they were last year. Like last year, they were unexpected. They came out of nowhere. They played this great defensive game, and away they went. They continue to play a solid defensive game, but I don't think they're catching anybody off guard this year. And I think they got more lucky this year than they did last. Their goaltending hasn't been as good as when Robin Lehner was there. But I do think that there is going to be... I think that they're a little bit of a misnomer. I don't really think that they were as good as being a 7-ranked team in these playoffs shows. I really think that this is maybe a flip-flop. Like the way that the Panthers played everything outside of goaltending, the Panthers are much better than a 10 seed in these playoffs. The Islanders, to me, are worse than a 7. And when I look at this series, I think this is probably the most likely to be an upset out of any series that we've done thus far. The 8-9s, who cares? But I really think the Florida Panthers, if they can get any goaltending out of Sergei Bobrovsky, is that maybe the biggest game changer in these entire playoffs? Is there a bigger, this one player on this team that's struggled all year long, if he can come in and be himself, or even just be average, a little above average, this Florida Panthers team might be a team that could not just win these preliminary rounds, but they could have a deep playoff run. I think they're set up for it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And when you talk about the defense, right, starting at the back end, that's where offense is supposed to start. And to me, when I look at this Islanders defense, I see nobody in my mind who I think can be a real puck mover for this team. Nick Leddy was supposed to be that guy. He started off when he came to the island, putting up some good numbers. But since Barry Trotz has come over, it's been stale. The offense hasn't really been there for what they thought they were getting when they signed him. Luckily for the Islanders, Boychuk is coming back. He's going to be healthy after missing, I believe it was the last 3 games of the regular season. But again, I think you have a lot of guys that are just defensive defensemen, guys that don't really move the puck very well. There's no one that stands off the page to me, and I think when you look at this team as a whole, right, that's kind of their mantra, right, just playing defense. And so if push comes to shove and they have to match up goal for goal with the Florida Panthers, it's going to be a nightmare. I mean, again, we talked about it. Florida's got a lot of talent up front, a lot of guys that can score some goals. And if the Islanders have to start moving the puck from their back end, start having guys pinch in, it could spell doom for them. And, again, when you go back a little further, right, we look at the goaltending, and you mentioned it, again, since Leonard left, this goaltending wasn't what it was last year. I mean, Leonard and Greiss were both putting up .930 save percentages, and now it's just your run-of-the-mill average .913, .914 kind of save percentage out of Varlamov and Greiss. And there's the other big question, too. Who's your starter? I would assume Varlamov is probably the guy they're going to go to because they did give him the term on his new deal. So
yeah, I mean, he played in 45 games. Greiss played in 31. So you got to think he's the guy. But I mean, really, their stats are quite similar. I mean, in terms of quality starts, pretty much the exact same percentage on their games. They both had a few really bad starts. I mean, they're very even. You're right, like 914, 913 save percentage. Like it's the exact same thing. So I guess in terms of playoff experience between the two of them, neither of them have a ton.
No.
Thomas Greiss has made it into the playoffs a few times. He played for the San Jose Sharks in a game in 2010. He went on a nice run with the Islanders in 2016. He was actually the one that beat the Florida Panthers as their goaltender. And then, of course, he played against Tampa Bay and lost in those. So that's kind of his lone experience. 2016 is really his one run. He played in one game last year and was brought in at the end of it. Semyon Varlamov, though, I mean, you think about him in Colorado, he certainly didn't have a lot of experience lately. The last time he made the playoffs, 2014, when Colorado lost in 7 games to the Minnesota Wild, and then he went on a nice run with the Washington Capitals in 2009 and 2010. He had a couple runs, but it's been a while since he played in the playoffs. 6 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, who do you go with? I guess you're not at that point. You're not really worried about your playoff experience. You just want somebody to come in and basically play the way that they've been playing in the regular season. That's the only way that the Islanders are going to beat the Florida Panthers is if they get rock solid goaltending. They're going to have to get fortunate. They're going to have to probably see the Sergei Bobrovsky that we saw all year, which was not very good. And if Florida doesn't get that goaltending that they need, then I think that they're done. Like that's really it. This whole series comes down to goaltending, maybe more than any other series, because I mean, you've got a Vezina Trophy winner, a recent Vezina Trophy winner backing your team up. He was just absolute garbage all year long. I mean, a 3.23 save or goals against, 900 save percentage. If that is up at the 915, he probably wins 4 or 5 extra games this season and is having a pretty decent year. I mean, I guess you can consider the fact that Chris Dredger played 12 games. He played some games down the stretch for the Panthers. I think he played their last 3 games or 3 of the last 4. 938 save percentage, a 205 goals against. He played pretty well. I just can't see the Panthers saying, hey, you played really well in some random stretch in March. Let's give you the start when they're paying Bobrovsky $10 million.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, he's the one wild card in all of this whole entire series, right? Bobrovsky, if he can get a little bit of what he was last year when Columbus upsets the Tampa Bay Lightning, I mean, I don't see any way the Islanders are going to stand a chance because if it does come down to goaltending, again, if you get a little bit better Bobrovsky, I think, Florida's got enough offense to really, hold the Islanders in check. And I think Coach Q is smart enough to figure out how to counterattack any sort of defensive systems they might have. And so, it'll be an interesting series, moving up front. When you talk about forwards now, the Florida Panthers to me are just stacked.
Oh yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think when you look at center depth, I would probably give the nod to the Islanders, but everywhere else, it's all Florida. I mean, they've got the goal scorers with Hoffman, Huberdeau, and Dadonov. They've got Sasha Barkov centering that top line, and even Eric Hollis, not a bad center, maybe not an ideal number 2 center, but he's still a decent center to have in your lineup. So, and then even further down, you got Brett Connolly, Noel Acciari, who, was known to have a little playoff success with the Bruins in the past. So this will be quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, here's the opportunity, I guess, for this. This is going to be Barzal versus Barkov. I mean, that's really, I think, how we have to look at this. I mean, it's the young guy on the Islanders. Can he? I mean, he's had 60 points this year. Probably would have ended up with somewhere around 70 to 75 when all was said and done if they played a full 82. Outside of him, there's not a whole lot of goal score or a point getting for this Islanders team, and I think that ultimately is going to be their downfall. I mean, you look at the Panthers; they had basically 3 guys with over 60 points right now, like through the end of the year. You have Huberdeau at 78, Barkov 62, Hoffman at 59, Dadonov at 47, Yandel at 45, Ekblad at 41. I mean, they've got 2 defensemen who have way more points than any defender on the Islanders has coming into this. I mean, outside of the fact that Vince Trocheck is gone from Florida, which I know shocked us all when that happened, I still think that the Florida Panthers, I really think this is the one series that I'm fairly confident in picking the underdog to win this, at least the lower seed to win this series. Also, you look at the power play, the Islanders, we'll go to like special teams. The Islanders' 24th ranked power play, only a 17.2%. By far the least power play opportunities in the league, 168. The next lowest is 184. So there not a whole lot of power play opportunities for this Islanders team. They were 15th in penalty kill and the 3rd lowest power play opportunities against. So that always helps. They're not getting a lot of power plays, but they only got 176 power plays for the opposite team. The Panthers, though, coming in at a 21.33% power play. And their penalty kill isn't great. It's really only a couple percentage points off of where the Islanders are. And granted, the Panthers have the 5th lowest power play opportunities against. So this will probably be a pretty low amount of power plays, but this Panthers power play is so much more dangerous than the Islanders. And that, to me, could be the difference. You get good goaltending from Bobrovsky, and if the Panthers power play connects at 20%, I think they probably win this series.
Yeah, and the one thing, when you talk about other factors outside of Bobrovsky for the Florida Panthers, you've got 3 guys in their top 6 forwards who are playing for new contracts and probably like their last big deals. I mean, you got Mike Hoffman, Dadonov, and Eric Haula, all 3 guys 29, 30, and 31 in age that are probably playing for their last big money deals coming after this season. And so, they've got something to prove that I can still contribute in, this new age NHL, at 30 plus years old. And so I think those guys are going to go hard. They're going to try to put up a lot of points so they can cash in the offseason. And, it could pay dividends for the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, one guy on the Panthers not to sleep on. He played 39 games with the Panthers and had 15 points, but a guy who has had some, maybe some ups and downs, but has made real differences in the playoffs. And now that we've had a lot of time off, likely very healthy, Brian Boyle could be a guy on that 4th line for the Panthers that could make a big difference, because the Islanders, if they have anything, it is depth through their forward position. I mean, they don't have a lot of power up at the top. Like, there's not a whole lot of star power, but they have quite a few bodies that they can roll through. So I think the one advantage is they might have a better 3rd, 4th line than the Florida Panthers. But Brian Boyle could be a guy to keep an eye on in these playoffs, a guy who's been relied upon for faceoffs. He's not opposed to having Brian Boyle go out, take a draw, get off the ice, and on comes somebody else. I think he could be a little bit of a sleeper in this series. So we shall see. So let's give your prediction for this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go Florida Panthers in 3 games.
Wow, a nice sweep.
Yeah.
I'm saying we're going the distance, and what I want to get real specific, and I want to say the Florida Panthers win in overtime in Game 5 to kind of right the demons of losing Game 7 in overtime a few years ago to the Islanders. So I go Panthers in 5. Sounds like we're both fairly down on the Islanders, but it's still going to be a good series. I don't know if I see a sweep. I don't know if any of these teams are going to sweep anybody in these preliminary rounds. I feel like everything's just too random. There's a randomness about this that I just don't see any team just knocking off 3 in a row. But that's just me. Okay, let's go Vancouver Canucks and the Minnesota Wild, the other 7-10. Really in the regular season, quite even between the two of these teams. Minnesota took 2 of 3, one of them in a shootout. January 12th, so they've actually played all 3 of their games within the final 2 months of the regular season. We see January 12th, the Canucks win 4-1. February 6th, the Wild win 4-2. And then February 19th, the Wild happen to win in a shootout 4-3. So almost the same, very similar goal differentials and quite close in all their games. As well, the Canucks 10th in goals for, 13th in goals against. The Wild 14th in goals for and 10th in goals against. So almost the exact same positioning, just flip-flopped on those two things. Two teams that can score goals sometimes. They're not bad defensively. And I think both these teams are very even in just so many ways. That's probably where I'd land. The one thing is that the Wild had a much better finish to the season. The Canucks, a much better start.
Yeah, and when you talk about finishes, right, I think all bets are off when you talk about the last stretch, right? Minnesota obviously coming in hot. I think what was it, their last I think it was their last 18 games. NHL.com says that they went 12-5-1. So obviously super hot down the stretch. I mean, we know what Kevin Fiala did for this team, kind of the spark there, right? I mean, I picked them up in fantasy, and it paid off very handsomely. But, again, Markstrom coming back for Vancouver, Minnesota now hitting the pause button on that hot streak. So, to me, all bets are off when you talk about streaks, right? It's just going to be whose game is going to come out bigger in this contest.
Yeah, momentum doesn't mean anything now. I would say the Wild – or one of the luckier teams in the league, 101.2 PDO, which is your shooting percentage and save percentage combined 5-on-5. They had the 5th highest, so they definitely made the most of their opportunities, got some clutch goaltending. They also had a league high 10.6% shooting, which is very high, and oftentimes we see teams like that take a dip back, like over the course of the 68, however many games they played in the regular season, over the course of those games, they did shoot inordinately high shooting percentage. So that is going to play a factor. I mean, you probably aren't going to get 10.6% in the playoffs. Whereas the Canucks their PDO was very normal, right around the middle, 100.5. So I think the Canucks were probably about where they should be. The Wild probably got a little lucky.
Yeah, I mean, that's safe to say. And, again, when you talk about teams here, right, and the difference, I look at Minnesota as kind of like an old dog sensing its end. The window's closing, right? You got guys like, again, Eric Stahl, Zach Parise, Ryan Suter, who are a little bit, past their prime in terms of age. And, their opportunities to win. Devin Dubnyk, another example, they're kind of on their way out. And, this Wild team, up against the cap, so they can't make any drastic changes in the offseason to really spur a new, open that window a little wider. So to me, this is an opportunity for Minnesota to come in here and beat, a much younger Vancouver Canucks team, inexperienced anyways. When you talk about guys like Elias Pettersson, Bo Horvat,
Quinn Hughes,
Brock Besser. Yeah, these young guys who don't have a ton of experience, right?
Right, the entire core, they've never been to the playoffs.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say when I look at Minnesota's defense, obviously, but like Minnesota's defense is their top four is one of the better top four in the league, I think. Like Ryan Suter, Matt Dumba, when they're healthy, they're both phenomenal defensemen. Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, two maybe like very, very underrated defensemen. And I'd say in terms of being playoff tested, this Minnesota Wild defense in particular has so much experience. They're so much more tested. And I look at, all right, let's look at matchups. Like who's going to be on the ice the most for each of these teams? Well, it's going to be Ryan Suter and Matt Dumba. On the other side, you're going to see a lot of Quinn Hughes. And, you're going to see a lot, I guess you're going to see a lot of like a Tyler Myers or an Alexander Edler, Tanev. But Quinn Hughes is going to be the guy. He's going to get his extra playing time for sure, and he's going to be going up against these other guys who aren't as good offensively. Quinn Hughes is the best offensive defenseman in the series, but is Matt Dumba the best defenseman in this series, and how much of a difference does that make?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, right? When you talk about it, Quinn Hughes coming off that tremendous Calder season. Whether or not he'll get the trophy is yet to be seen. But to me, I would probably put my money on Ryan Suter being the best defenseman in the series. I think overall, obviously Dumba is probably the better defenseman, but I think Ryan Suter is going to be the guy. He's going to be the better defenseman out of all 3, 6, however many defensemen you want to throw in the pot. He's going to be the guy for me that I'm going to look to and say, okay, you got to lead this group because, again, Minnesota, to me, you talk about the shooting percentage. I don't think they're going to be such a high goal-scoring team, and so they're going to have to rely a little bit more on those veteran defensemen to really kind of lead the way and I think, lead the offense as well. And so, to me, I look at Ryan Suter and think that he's going to be the go-to guy for me.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's and I think that in this situation where now we've gotten a lot of rest, like Ryan Suter could play 35 minutes a night, and that's not an exaggeration.
Absolutely.
Especially in this shortened series, you're going to see a lot of Ryan Suter. I think you'll see a lot of Matt Dumba too. But it's going to be interesting. It really is the like veteran kind of the team that, this is really maybe a last hurrah for this team. They were lucky. I mean, let's face it, they're lucky to get in. They probably wouldn't have gotten into the playoffs. They've got some guys with stuff to prove. I mean, Eric Stahl, here's your chance at the playoffs. Zach Parise, we know what he can be when he's very healthy. And maybe this is Zach Parise's opportunity to do something that he hasn't been able to do. Go to the playoffs fully healthy. And then you've got Mikko Koivu. He's a UFA at the end of the year. Maybe Alex Galchenyuk. We talk about the previous series where guys in the Panthers they're out to prove a contract. Who in these playoffs needs to prove themselves more than Alex Galchenyuk?
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with you more. Or couldn't disagree with you less. Obviously, his stock hit rock bottom when he was in Pittsburgh. They pretty much dumped him off as saying this guy's no better than a fourth liner. So go to Minnesota. And now here's your opportunity, right, to cash in, get a new deal. Whether it means you have to take a 1-year deal, but you still get paid a little bit more and get another prove me contract. But he's a guy who can really step up and help this Minnesota team because, again, when we talk about a lot of the veteran guys on this team, maybe they don't have the speed and the, legs that, a younger team like Vancouver is going to have because we know what Elias Pettersson can do. We know what Brock Besser can do. Those guys can skate, and they're going to go hard, and they're going to go fast. So here's another young guy, Alex Galchenyuk, who I think is a great skater. He can move he can move quick. So is he going to be relied upon maybe a little bit more than a guy like Eric Stahl at center who, maybe doesn't have the legs or the wheels that, an Elias Pettersson might have?
Sure. When you look at this team's, Minnesota in particular, their goaltending, you mentioned Markstrom coming back from an injury. I think it's likely he gets the start in the playoffs, despite Thatcher Demko playing very well down the stretch for the Canucks. I think Markstrom is their guy. Like, you're going to give him the opportunity to do this. It'll be we talked about it on another show. That'll be interesting to see if anybody decides to continue to split time, see who's the freshest right now. But I would expect Markstrom starts game 1. The Minnesota Wild, though, are really it's up in the air to me who starts because Alex Stalock was starting a lot of games during their hot streak. And I'm wondering if if maybe Alex Stalock gets the nod over Devin Dubnyk.
Yeah, this will really be interesting. I mean, like you said it, Stalock was coming in hot. He was playing really well, but Dubnyk's proven in the playoffs that, he can really hold his own, and he can help carry a team down the stretch. So, who's going to be the go-to guy for Minnesota? I don't really know. And not to mention that, but they've got this guy who just won the AHL Goaltender of the Year, Capo Kokkonen, a .913 save percentage in 5 games, looked really, really good, did not look uncomfortable or out of place in my opinion. So he's a guy that I know Minnesota wants to use in the future and wants to be their goaltender of the future, but maybe do they give him some time? Do they let him start the playoffs and say, hey, we got in, we maybe shouldn't have been in the playoffs this year, so let's just roll the dice, see what we got out of this guy, because obviously Dubnyk is, getting up there in age. He's not going to be here for, much longer. So let's go with the guy of the future here and see what he can do for us. That
would be a pretty interesting turn of events if that
right.
if that were to happen. I mean, yeah, Dubnyk certainly didn't have the year that, you talk about an underperforming guy. We talked about Bobrovsky, and Dubnyk had an even worse season. Only started 28 games this year, an .890 save percentage, .335 goals against. Only 32% of his starts were quality starts. He had an awful year. In my mind, though, you gotta stick with him. Like, you give him every opportunity to be your starter. You know what you have in him. Alex Stalock. If Alex Stalock's a 25-year-old guy and he was just kind of coming into his own, and you saw the way that he played towards the end of the year, and you said, "Wow, this guy could be our goalie." Maybe you go with him in that situation. He's 32 years old. He had a good little stretch of games, but I think you know what you're getting with Alex Stalock. It's very average goaltending at best, but Dubnyk does have the ability to have a 925 save percentage and really show up for these playoffs. I would expect that Dubnyk is going to get the benefit of the doubt, and we'll see what happens here. What do they really have to lose? They're the 10 seed. If they don't win this round, they're going to get a high draft pick. And that, frankly, is probably more what Minnesota needs anyways. But if they're going to win the series, they're going to win with Devin Dubnyk. I don't think they're winning it with Alex Stalock.
No, I don't disagree with you when you talk about Stalock versus Dubnyk. I would definitely go with Dubnyk over Stalock because, one, obviously Dubnyk's got more playoff experience, and he's shown that he can show up in the playoffs. But on the flip side, to me, that wild card is that third goalie in Kakkonen. Now, on the flip side, when you look at Vancouver, this is going to be interesting. I know Markstrom's going to be the guy. He's coming back, off that injury. He's going to be fresh. He's going to be ready to go and had a great regular season. But to me, this is going to be a lot of fun to watch for, in terms of the goaltending matchups, because Markstrom is going to be a guy who's a UFA next season. And I think this is a big turning point for this franchise in terms of, do we hand the reins over to Demko and, maybe DiPietro and say these guys are going to be the future moving forward? Or is Markstrom going to be a guy we can re-sign because we know he can give us success in the playoffs? And so this is a prove-it time for Jacob Markstrom to say, I deserve another contract with this franchise. I'm your guy. I'm the guy who's going to lead this franchise to success moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're probably looking to keep him around for another 2 or 3 years. Because, while Demko may be ready, we've seen it. It pays off to have 2 really good goaltenders.
Absolutely.
So I think you're spending your money. I did actually see something within the last 24 hours that they did come out and say that he is an important guy for them to keep around. That to me says he's probably getting the nod here. And even if Thatcher Demko, if it becomes a 1A, 1B situation, which it pretty much has become, I do think that Markstrom was the better goalie. Statistically speaking, that is true, but I think you got to give Markstrom the reins here. He has earned the chance to win for this team in the playoffs. He's 30 years old. He was traded here a long time ago from the Panthers, and this is his chance. I think he was traded for Roberto Luongo, right?
He was, maybe. Yeah.
He's played a lot of games for the Canucks over the last five seasons. He's been their starter, and I think that again, he deserves to maybe have some success with this team, and it's good to see. So I'm thinking that he is the starter for the playoffs for the Canucks. and then Dubnyk for the Wild. Last thing that we haven't really touched on is the special teams, and this is where I think it's going to, like you said, I really think this series is going to be fun because these two teams are teams that maybe we don't necessarily think of as these potent goal-scoring teams, but they do have the ability to score goals by committee. And, I mean, Vancouver, 4th best power play in the league, 24%, and the 2nd most power play opportunities. Only the Edmonton Oilers scored more power play goals, and the Edmonton Oilers power play is insane. Whereas Minnesota, they've got the 11th ranked power play, 21.3%. And I look at both these power plays. There's going to be some goals. I mean, Vancouver, 16th best penalty kill, 80%. Minnesota at 77%. They only had the 25th best penalty kill. I think that the special teams is where this is going to get interesting and fun. Vancouver's got a great power play. Minnesota's power play does have a lot of talent on it. They've got some great hands. You think Eric Stahl, Zach Parise, both down low. I mean, these guys are, I think between the two of them, they had 17 power play goals. Kevin Fiala had 9. This power play is a fun power play to watch. I think that really that's your biggest wild card in this is, because Minnesota is a little slower. We've seen it. Vancouver has the most power play, their 2nd most power play opportunities in the league. Why? They're so fast that teams are having to haul them down. They're taking tripping penalties. They're taking hooking penalties against them. Interference, because they need to slow them down any way that they can. And is that going to result in Vancouver getting 4 to 6 power plays a game in this series? I think that it might, especially coming off this long break where your speed isn't just disappearing.
Yeah, that'll be the key for sure. And I mean, there's so much depth at the 4th position for both these teams. This is going to be a fun series. This is going to be one of my more, I would say, favorite series to watch in the qualifying round, just because, these are two teams to me that, Vancouver, I think, is ahead of schedule in terms of their rebuild, and Minnesota kind of on the way out. So you got kind of two polar opposites here in terms of, just that aspect alone. And so it'll make for just some fun, entertaining games for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is that with it being in Vancouver for 3 games potentially, I think that those are the 10 o'clock games, so they're easy to watch. There aren't very many. I think it's just Vancouver is the only Pacific time team that made the playoffs.
Well, you do have Edmonton, but
but they're Mountain Time.
But I will say though, they haven't really chosen the hub cities yet. I know they're going to narrow it down to 2.
Oh, that's true. They're doing the hub city. I forgot about that.
Yeah. But I do think right now Edmonton, from everything I hear, is Edmonton or Las Vegas are going to be one of the leading candidates for a city, and it really depends on, again, whether or not that whole border issue with U.S. Canada, if they let these guys go over or not, without any 2-week quarantines, that sort of stuff. So I think regardless, you're going to have one West Coast city, and a team like Vancouver, they'll probably throw that series out there just because they want to try to get those fans that are going to stay up in Vancouver to watch this.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what ultimately happens. We know players are starting to practice again, so that's a good sign. I think we're still probably a little ways away from seeing actual live hockey, probably minimum 8 weeks away from seeing the playoffs begin. But we are going to have the draft lottery that's coming up in a couple weeks, so we'll keep our ears on that and watch what happens. I know that as a Red Wings fan, you're going to be hoping that the odds go in your favor this time.
Yeah, luckily the Wings can't fall any further than 4th place in the lottery, but the way their luck's been the last few lotteries, it wouldn't surprise me if they don't hit one of those top 3 balls.
Yeah, I at this point they deserve. I hope that Alexis Lafreniere comes to Detroit. I mean, I'm not a Red Wings fan, but I would love to be able to go see him play whenever I want.
Yeah, there you go.
That's going to be a blast. Either him or Byfield or whoever, anyone that goes in the top 3 is always usually pretty good. So, but Lafreniere in particular, I think, is probably the most likely to be the next Matthews, Eichel, I'm not going to say McDavid because that's just not fair to anybody, but he really does have maybe the most impressive resume coming into the draft over anyone since McDavid. So, and that also is mostly because Matthews didn't play in North America the year before he was drafted. But that'll be really, really fun. Looking forward to that. We will be breaking down the 8-9 series next, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I'm blanking on the other series. Who's on the other series?
Who's on the West Coast? That's the Flames and Jets.
Yes, the Flames and the Jets. Good old Canadian series. That one will be fun.
That will be. But before we go, though, I got to know your prediction here in this series.
Yes, of course. Prediction for Vancouver and Minnesota. I am picking the Vancouver Canucks to win this one. I'm going to say they take it in 4 games, and that'll be that.
All right, yeah. I actually am going to have to agree with you for the first time. This will be Vancouver in 4.
All right. Well, there we go. That is your 7-10 pre-playoff predictions and preview. We hope you enjoyed it. Find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and you'll let us know what you thought, and we will be back with you very soon. We promise we'll eventually get to starting to rank some of these countries again, like we've done. If you haven't heard the Czech Republic yet, you can go and listen to that. But we'll hop back on that once. I think there's going to be a little bit of a lull here to leading into the playoffs anyway, so we'll get back to doing some rankings. Until then, enjoy the summer weather. We'll talk to you soon.